shocking twist has erupted in a case already capturing national attention. The judge presiding over Karoline Leavitt's massive $800 million lawsuit has reportedly fled the country, sending ripples through the legal and political landscape. The abrupt disappearance comes just as legal proceedings were accelerating, with insiders confirming that significant pressure was building behind the scenes to push the case forward. Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative figure and former White House staffer, filed the explosive lawsuit earlier this year targeting a range of individuals and entities. While details of the suit remain tightly guarded under seal, sources close to the matter suggest it includes allegations of defamation, misconduct, and coordinated political sabotage against her and her associates. The sheer size of the claim, $800 million, instantly drew national scrutiny, but it's the bizarre developments surrounding the case that are now fueling speculation of deeper systemic rot. The judge, whose identity has not been officially confirmed by federal sources, but is widely believed to be a longtime judicial fixture with ties to high-profile political cases, reportedly left the United States within the past 72 hours. According to multiple credible reports, he boarded an international flight out of a private airport, using emergency credentials that bypassed normal immigration oversight. Attempts to trace his current location have so far failed, and federal agencies are now said to be involved in tracking his movements. This unprecedented development has triggered a legal firestorm. Court staff were reportedly blindsided by the judge's absence. One clerk, speaking anonymously, described the scene as chaotic when proceedings were abruptly halted. Everything was moving fast. We were getting orders to schedule depositions, set hearing dates, then suddenly silence. No word, no explanation. And then the rumors started flying that he was gone. Multiple insiders confirmed that the legal process had begun to speed up rapidly in the days leading to the judge's disappearance. Leavitt's legal team had been pushing aggressively for depositions and preliminary rulings, and sources say that evidence was starting to mount against some of the key individuals named in the suit. The judge's exit, they suggest, is no coincidence. This is not a matter of someone going on vacation or stepping aside for health reasons, one senior attorney familiar with the case asserted. This is an escape. You don't vanish in the middle of a federal case of this magnitude unless you're running from something or someone. The political ramifications are already exploding. Allies of Leavitt are demanding answers, claiming that the judge's departure suggests judicial corruption or political interference at the highest levels. Prominent conservative commentators have seized on the story, pointing to it as further evidence of institutional breakdown. Meanwhile, opposition voices have urged caution, noting that official confirmation of the judge's motivations is still pending. Still, even neutral observers admit the timing is damning. The fact that legal momentum had picked up, perhaps placing key players at risk of exposure, has only deepened public suspicion. There is increasing talk of a second judge being rushed into place, possibly under emergency appointment. However, legal experts caution that restarting a case of this scale without the original presiding judge will create major procedural challenges and could compromise the entire trial's legitimacy. For Karoline Leavitt, the judge's disappearance adds a surreal twist to what was already a high-stakes legal battle. In a brief statement issued through her attorney, she called for full transparency and demanded that the Department of Justice step in immediately. The American people deserve answers. This case will continue and we will not be intimidated or silenced. Even as investigators scramble to track the judge's whereabouts, the fallout has only begun. Congressional leaders are reportedly being briefed and oversight committees are now eyeing potential hearings. There's growing consensus that this may become more than a courtroom drama. It could morph into a broader inquiry into judicial accountability and political weaponization. What started as a massive civil suit now threatens to evolve into a national scandal. With a federal judge missing, a firestorm of speculation growing by the hour, and an election season on the horizon, the implications of this disappearance could be felt far beyond the courthouse, possibly reshaping trust in America's legal institutions for years to come. In Washington, the shockwaves are reverberating across both aisles. While some Democrats have remained cautiously silent, Others are calling for an independent review of the circumstances surrounding the judge's departure. Meanwhile, Republican EO lawmakers, many aligned with Leavitt's brand of bold, unapologetic conservatism, are demanding immediate hearings and the release of all related internal communications. Senator Mark Holloway of Texas didn't mince words during a press briefing. This isn't just a legal issue, it's a matter of national integrity. When a federal judge abandons their post in the middle of one of the largest civil lawsuits in history, the public deserves to know why. If there was coercion, if there was blackmail, if there was political intimidation, it must come to light. Sources on Capitol Hill suggest a closed-door emergency briefing has already been requested by several members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The FBI and U.S. Marshal Service are now said to be involved, though both agencies declined official comment, citing the sensitive and potentially criminal nature of the situation. Speculation is also growing about the judge's personal and professional background. Leaks hint that he had previously presided over other high-profile cases involving government officials, media conglomerates, and corporate lobbying groups. Questions are swirling about whether past decisions may have left him vulnerable, either politically compromised or the target of powerful interests. If that's the case, his departure may have been less about fleeing and more about being forced out. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's camp is seizing the moment to cast this episode as proof of the very corruption her lawsuit was designed to expose. In a follow-up statement, she warned that this may only be the tip of the iceberg. They tried to silence us through the courts. Now even the courts are running scared. This should terrify every American. Legal scholars are grappling with the implications. The abrupt disappearance of a judge in an ongoing federal case isn't just unusual, it's almost unheard of. This has no precedent in modern judicial history, said Professor Alan Drexler, a constitutional law expert. If it's confirmed that the judge fled to avoid ruling on key motions or under pressure, it opens the door to chaos. Every decision he made could be challenged. Every case he oversaw may come under review. As the judiciary scrambles to maintain order, media outlets are in a frenzy. Investigative teams have begun piecing together the judge's final known movements, tracking financial transactions, property records, and any signs of sudden behavioral change. One journalist from a major national network claims to have obtained footage showing the judge entering a private hangar in the early morning hours, escorted by two unidentified individuals in dark suits. That footage has not yet been independently verified. Online, the public is deeply divided. Some see the judge's flight as a glaring admission of guilt, proof that something sinister is unfolding behind the scenes. Others, however, suggest it could be a strategic move for protection, possibly tied to whistleblower information or threats made against him or his family. Theories range from plausible to outlandish, but one thing is clear. Trust in the legal system has taken a major hit. In the coming days, the court must decide how to proceed. Will a new judge be appointed? Will hearings resume? Or will the entire case be thrown into limbo? Legal experts warn that any delay could hurt the credibility of the court and the lawsuit alike. Still, Karoline Leavitt remains resolute. Her legal team is preparing emergency motions to preserve evidence, freeze assets, and force testimony from key figures named in the lawsuit. They can delay us. They can try to scare us. But we're not backing down, her lead attorney said late Sunday night. The truth will come out, and this time it won't be buried behind a bench. The nation now watches as this legal saga turns into a full-blown political earthquake. What began as a lawsuit has triggered a crisis of confidence in the very systems meant to uphold justice. And as more details emerge, the story is poised to grow even darker. As the hours pass, new revelations are emerging that only deepen the crisis. Early Monday morning, a sealed warrant request reportedly surfaced, filed just days before the judge vanished. Though its contents remain classified, a leak from a federal insider suggests it may involve surveillance data tied to undisclosed communications between the judge and outside parties, potentially high-ranking officials or corporate executives linked to the lawsuit. If true, this would mark a turning point, suggesting that the judge may not have simply fled out of fear but out of direct involvement. Suddenly, the narrative isn't just about a judge running from responsibility. It's about whether the bench itself has been compromised from within. Several whistleblowers are said to be preparing statements under legal protection. One, a former aide in the clerk's office, reportedly told investigators that unusual encrypted emails were routed through the judge's private account weeks before his disappearance. These messages, flagged for their foreign IP origins and encrypted headers, have now become a key part of the investigation, according to cybersecurity analysts close to the case. Meanwhile, national security concerns are creeping into the conversation. Some are asking whether the judge had been coerced or blackmailed by foreign interests, possibly with the aim of sabotaging a lawsuit that could expose sensitive connections between U.S. institutions and overseas power brokers. Others suggest this may be the first crack in a broader operation that could shake multiple pillars of American government. As pressure mounts, the Department of Justice remains silent, publicly at least. Internally, sources confirm that Attorney General offices have activated an interagency task force. With intelligence officials now reportedly in the loop, this case has outgrown its origins in civil litigation. It has morphed into something else entirely. Part legal drama, part national security thriller. But for Karoline Leavitt, this is more than a dramatic turn of events. It's validation. Every strange occurrence, every shadowy maneuver she hinted at in her public statements is now being reflected back in real time. Her supporters, galvanized by what they see as systemic obstruction, have taken to social media in massive numbers, demanding transparency, arrests, and immediate disclosure of the judge's international ties. On the ground, courthouse security has been tightened. Media crews circle like vultures, desperate for footage, answers, anything. Staff are under strict orders to remain silent, but leaks continue to trickle. One source now claims that the judge's chambers were found in disarray. Files missing, hard drives removed, paper records shredded. If true, it would confirm deliberate effort to erase traces before departure. This development is triggering alarms in other pending cases as well. Legal watchdog groups are urging a full-scale audit of the judge's docket, calling for independent reviews of rulings over the past 5 years. Some speculate that his flight may prompt a retroactive invalidation of key verdicts, possibly reopening dozens of politically sensitive cases. As of now, Karoline Leavitt has requested an emergency public hearing to address the case's status. Her legal team is also filing a petition to compel disclosure of the judge's travel documents, security clearance history, and financial records, documents that could hold the key to understanding why someone would abandon a federal bench in the middle of the most high-profile lawsuit of the year. The public is waiting. The institutions are teetering. And with every hour that passes without accountability, the question becomes more urgent. Who or what is powerful enough to make a federal judge disappear? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. This story is far from over. And if the current trajectory continues, it could become one of the most consequential legal political scandals in modern American history. By Tuesday morning, the scandal had reached a fever pitch. A private investigative firm hired by an independent watchdog group claimed to have tracked the judge to a villa on the outskirts of Dubrovnik, Croatia. Though still unverified, satellite images appeared to show a man matching the judge's profile entering the gated compound under tight security. Croatian authorities have declined to confirm or deny the reports, citing diplomatic protocol and a lack of formal extradition request from the United States. The State Department has reportedly begun quiet diplomatic inquiries, but tensions are escalating behind the scenes. If confirmed, the judge's presence in Croatia, outside the reach of immediate U.S. legal authority, would complicate any effort to bring him back for questioning. The move raises the chilling possibility that he fled not just for safety, but under protection, perhaps even at the behest of shadowy actors invested in derailing the lawsuit entirely. Back home, the political atmosphere has turned incendiary. In a rare bipartisan moment, members of Congress from both parties are now calling for emergency hearings. House and Senate committees have begun drafting subpoenas for court officials, DOJ representatives, and individuals previously named in Leavitt's complaint. If the judge was indeed involved in a wider cover-up, these hearings could expose ties that run through media, corporate, and political channels, putting America's institutions on trial in the court of public opinion. Karoline Leavitt appeared on live television Tuesday afternoon, her demeanor firm and unflinching. "This is no longer about me. This is about whether the people who swore an oath to protect justice have betrayed it," she said. "If they can make a judge disappear, they can make anyone disappear. This is a wake-up call for the entire country." Her comments were followed by a pointed demand: a special counsel investigation, independent from the DOJ, to probe not just the judge's flight, but the origins and obstructions surrounding the entire $800 million case. The call was met with roaring applause from her supporters, and swift resistance from establishment figures fearful of the political fallout such an inquiry could unleash. Legal experts are now weighing in on the implications of continuing the lawsuit without the original presiding judge. Under normal circumstances, a new judge would be appointed and the case would resume. But these are far from normal circumstances. A federal bench compromised by sudden, unexplained disappearance introduces new grounds for mistrial and appeals. Defense attorneys representing the accused parties are already preparing motions to dismiss on the basis of judicial interference. "The integrity of the process has been shattered," said Natalie Kearns, a former federal prosecutor. "You can't pretend business as usual when your presiding judge vanishes overseas under a cloud of political suspicion and potential criminal activity." And yet, the momentum behind Leavitt's case only grows stronger. Key witnesses who were hesitant to testify are now stepping forward. At least 2 individuals once considered peripheral to the case have reportedly turned over encrypted documents and internal communications that may tie influential political operatives to efforts to suppress the lawsuit. If authenticated, these materials could not only validate Leavitt's claims, they could ignite a wave of indictments. The White House has remained publicly neutral, but inside sources say senior aides are monitoring the situation closely, preparing for the political shockwaves this could send into the upcoming election season. For an administration already battling multiple crises, a rogue judge abroad and a judicial credibility scandal at home could become an existential threat. Meanwhile, the judiciary itself is under siege. Trust in the courts has plummeted as Americans across the political spectrum question whether justice can still be delivered without fear, bias, or manipulation. A recent overnight poll showed a 27% drop in public confidence in the federal judiciary, a stunning plunge in just 72 hours. And still the central mystery remains: why did the judge flee? Was it out of fear, guilt, or coercion? Or is something even darker at play, something the public has yet to grasp? For now, Karoline Leavitt's voice rises above the chaos. Her message is direct. We will keep fighting. We will uncover the truth. And no matter how far they run, we will hold them accountable. This isn't just a legal case anymore. It's a battle for the soul of American justice, and it's far from finished. As Wednesday dawns, the situation shows no signs of cooling. In fact, it's escalating. Federal marshals have now been authorized to investigate potential violations of judicial ethics and national security breaches linked to the judge's disappearance. While officials remain tight-lipped about the scope of their mandate, insiders reveal that subpoenas have been issued to multiple tech companies for data related to encrypted communications allegedly used by the judge in the weeks before his departure. One source with direct knowledge claims there may be digital fingerprints connecting him to covert financial transactions routed through offshore accounts that could be linked to individuals directly named in Leavitt's lawsuit. This latest development adds weight to a growing theory. The judge may not have fled alone, but with help and possibly on orders. Adding to the firestorm is a new twist. A sealed motion in the case was leaked early Wednesday morning by a whistleblower. The document, marked confidential and dated just days before the judge left, reveals that a federal protection request was submitted on behalf of a high-profile legal official facing threats from international and domestic actors. While the name is redacted, legal experts agree it points unmistakably to the missing judge. What's more alarming is that the request was denied. That denial, reportedly over concerns about credibility and procedural inconsistencies, may have been the final catalyst. He was boxed in, one legal analyst surmised. Too compromised. To continue, too exposed to stay, and no one left to protect him. So he ran. Meanwhile, back in Washington, chaos is beginning to creep into the broader political system. Multiple federal judges have requested emergency security reviews, citing extraordinary risks surrounding politically sensitive cases. One court in New York reportedly postponed proceedings in an unrelated corruption trial, citing concerns over judicial continuity. It's becoming clear. The Leavitt case isn't just unraveling one case, it's threatening the structural perception of justice itself. In a dramatic press briefing Wednesday afternoon, a coalition of retired judges and legal scholars demanded full transparency. Standing before a packed room of reporters, retired Judge Helena Wexler declared, "If one judge can disappear under political pressure, then every case in this country is at risk. We demand a public televised investigation. The people deserve to see this, unfiltered and unredacted." The call has been echoed by civil rights groups, media watchdogs, and even a few reluctant voices from within the establishment. The integrity of the judiciary, once considered untouchable, is now squarely in the public's line of fire. Karoline Leavitt has remained relentless. Late Wednesday, she delivered a national address via live stream, viewed by over 10 million people, in under 2 hours. Standing before an American flag, she spoke not as a plaintiff but as a rallying voice for millions who feel betrayed by the system. They said we were crazy. They said it was just a lawsuit. Now the truth is cracking through the surface. They ran because they knew what was coming. But we're not running, we're rising. The live stream was immediately clipped and shared by influencers, pundits, and even foreign outlets, signaling that this story is no longer just a domestic crisis. It has become a global drama, one that raises fundamental questions about democracy, corruption, and the hidden power structures that operate behind closed doors. Even Wall Street isn't immune to the chaos. Late-day market instability has been attributed in part to fears over political instability stemming from the scandal. Legal uncertainty, especially in regulatory and compliance sectors, is beginning to rattle investor confidence. In the streets, protests have started to form, small but growing. Some carry signs demanding the judge's extradition. Others question the courts, the DOJ, and even the intelligence community. A particularly chilling chant echoed through the crowd in D.C. Who judges the judges? As night falls on the fourth day of this spiraling crisis, there are no clear answers, only more questions, more tension, more cracks in the foundation. But one thing is undeniable. The disappearance of a single federal judge has exposed far more than anyone anticipated. It's laid bare a system teetering on the edge. And in the middle of it all, Karoline Leavitt remains unwavering, her eyes set on the final revelation. The truth is coming. The only question left is, who will survive it? By Thursday morning, the headlines had officially shifted from judge missing to judiciary in crisis. What began as a bizarre footnote to Karoline Leavitt's $800 million lawsuit is now threatening to spiral into the most seismic reckoning the American legal system has faced in decades. Overnight, a bombshell expose by an independent journalist dropped what may be the most damning revelation yet. Financial records, allegedly obtained from a European banking leak, appear to tie the missing judge to two shell corporations based in Luxembourg and the British Virgin Islands. The leaked data shows steady deposits totaling over $6.4 million during a 9-month window, all originating from shadow accounts linked to a media conglomerate indirectly named in Leavitt's case. While the authenticity of the records is still being verified, their implications are staggering. If true, they suggest not only ethical failure but potentially criminal bribery. The missing judge may not have fled under duress. He may have been bought, silenced, or both. Within hours of the report's publication, pressure on the Department of Justice intensified. Lawmakers are now openly accusing high-ranking officials of stalling, pointing to the DOJ's silence as deliberate inaction. Senator Amelia Royce issued a scathing rebuke on the Senate floor, stating, "We are no longer dealing with a judicial anomaly. We are staring down the barrel of systemic collapse. If this judge was compromised, how many others are?" The judiciary, once an untouchable pillar, now sits on unstable ground. Behind closed doors, White House officials are reportedly scrambling to control the fallout. Two sources familiar with internal discussions say President Biden has been briefed extensively on the crisis and is considering a rare executive order to establish an independent federal commission. This commission would bypass traditional DOJ channels to investigate not only the Leavitt case but also broader judicial integrity concerns raised by the scandal. It would be an unprecedented move, one not seen since Watergate. But outside the Beltway, the story continues to boil over. A viral video posted Thursday afternoon by a former federal marshal turned whistleblower has added fuel to the inferno. In it, he claims that the missing judge was under unofficial surveillance weeks before his departure, an operation that, according to him, was halted after a direct order from within the DOJ. The video has already amassed over 30 million views across platforms, and calls for a nationwide protest are gaining traction. And then came the tapes. Late Thursday evening, a mysterious file surfaced on an encrypted platform used by whistleblowers. The audio, which has not yet been authenticated, appears to capture a conversation between the missing judge and an unknown individual. The voice, allegedly the judge's, can be heard saying, "I can't hold this back much longer. The documents, they know I've seen them. If I don't leave now, I won't. Make it out." The second voice responds, "Stick to the plan. You'll be protected. We can't let Leavitt win." Within minutes, clips from the audio were broadcast on international networks. Karoline Leavitt responded almost immediately. In a defiant midnight address, she declared the leaks a smoking gun and renewed her demand for a special counsel with full subpoena power. "Now you see it for yourselves. They knew, they planned, they ran. But justice isn't a courthouse, it's the truth, and the truth is on our side." Her supporters, now calling themselves the 800 Coalition, have announced a massive rally in Washington scheduled for the weekend. Organizers claim over 200,000 people are expected to descend on the Capitol, demanding answers, arrests, and reform. Meanwhile, legal scholars are torn between astonishment and dread. "This isn't just unprecedented," said Professor Lena Hirsch at Georgetown Law. "It's dangerous. We're now watching a full-blown collapse of judicial credibility in real time. And unless this is resolved transparently and urgently, the long-term damage to public trust may be irreversible." As the sun sets again over a capital city gripped by fear, fury, and anticipation, only one certainty remains. The disappearance of one judge has exposed a darkness far deeper than anyone was prepared to face. And the world is still watching, breath held, waiting for the next truth to break. By Friday morning, the storm had officially become a reckoning. Federal buildings in Washington, D.C. were fortified overnight. Barricades lined courthouse steps, and plainclothes agents patrolled rooftops. The air was thick with anticipation, not just of protests, but of possible revelations that could bring parts of the government grinding to a halt. A sealed emergency briefing was held in Congress behind closed doors. Leaks from inside suggest that lawmakers were shown preliminary intelligence linking the judge's escape route to a network of private charter services allegedly owned by a contractor with prior ties to covert government programs. The implication was staggering. Someone with the resources and knowledge of backdoor travel systems had enabled the judge's exit, possibly as part of an orchestrated extraction plan. Even more explosive, one senator reportedly demanded to know whether this contractor had been used in other sensitive disappearances. But while D.C. spiraled into high-alert crisis management, the streets told a different story. By midday, the first waves of protesters began arriving. The 800 Coalition had mobilized. Thousands flooded Constitution Avenue, many holding signs that read, "Justice hijacked," "Where is the judge?" and "No more black robes in the shadows." What began as a peaceful demonstration soon evolved into a massive call for reform. An unprecedented populist uprising aimed not just at the missing judge, but at the very structure of power he represented. Leavitt addressed the crowd live from the National Mall, her voice sharp and resolute. "We are not conspiracy theorists. We are witnesses. We are not radicals. We are the ones who still believe in the truth. And if the truth scares them, then that tells you everything you need to know." Her speech was met with thunderous applause, chants echoing blocks away. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the intelligence community was in motion. For the first time since the crisis began, sources inside the NSA confirmed that a task force had begun decrypting communications intercepted during the judge's final weeks on U.S. soil. According to an anonymous official, some of the messages point to foreign operatives monitoring Leavitt's legal team and possibly attempting to intercept witnesses. The official called it the tip of something far larger, adding, "This may have never been about one lawsuit. This may have been about silencing what that lawsuit was about to expose." As for the court system, it remains in chaos. Dozens of federal judges across the country have now recused themselves from cases that could be connected, either politically or procedurally, to Leavitt's. One district court in Chicago issued a public statement declaring that it would temporarily pause all hearings related to political lobbying investigations until the present national controversy is resolved. It's an unprecedented move, further solidifying the feeling that American justice is now treading water in the middle of a constitutional storm. Media outlets around the world have picked up the story. In London, Berlin, and Sydney, front pages bear the same question: can the U.S. justice system survive this? International leaders are issuing carefully worded statements, while adversarial governments are exploiting the scandal to undermine American credibility abroad. Inside the DOJ, pressure is peaking. Career prosecutors are reportedly clashing with political appointees over how to proceed. Some demand immediate arrests, others insist that acting without airtight evidence would only deepen the public's mistrust. But one name keeps surfacing in internal communications: special counsel. The idea of appointing a fully independent prosecutor, empowered to investigate everyone, from the missing judge to any official who may have interfered, is gaining traction. Sources say the decision could come within days, possibly hours. And then, late Friday night, another twist. A passport photo surfaced on an encrypted leak site, an image of the judge with an entry stamp dated 4 days prior. In Dubai. If the image is real, it shatters the current theory of Croatia as his primary destination and suggests a deliberate trail of misdirection. Dubai's lack of an extradition treaty with the United States adds another layer of complexity and alarm. It now appears that whoever planned his exit knew exactly how to avoid capture and how to weaponize legal gaps in global diplomacy. As Friday closes, the nation finds itself staring down a long weekend, unlike any in recent memory. What started as a courtroom drama has ignited into a full-blown institutional reckoning. The judiciary is fractured. The executive branch is scrambling. The people are mobilizing, and at the center of it all, Karoline Leavitt stands tall, demanding not just justice, but transformation. Whatever happens next won't just define this case. It may define the future of American law, transparency, and the balance of power itself. By Saturday morning, the country had entered unfamiliar terrain. Some called it a crisis, others a revolution. The massive rally in Washington, D.C. had swelled overnight. Tens of thousands more arrived in the early hours, stretching from the Capitol steps to the edge of the Lincoln Memorial. The protest, originally sparked by one woman's lawsuit, now stood as a thunderous call for systemic reform. The message wasn't subtle anymore. Banners read, "The courts are compromised. We demand exposure, and no more secrets." Karoline Leavitt took the stage just after 11 a.m., now flanked by whistleblowers, former federal agents, and legal experts who had joined her cause. Her tone had shifted. No longer just a plaintiff, she now spoke with the clarity of a national figure rallying a movement. "They told us the system works. They told us to trust the process. Then their process fled in the dead of night," she said, referencing the judge without naming him. "If the people must carry the burden of truth alone, then so be it. We will carry it, and we will deliver it. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just about her lawsuit anymore. It was about the unspoken realization that a fissure had cracked through the foundation of American legal power, and the people had seen it. Meanwhile, backroom battles were intensifying in Washington. White House officials met with senior members of the intelligence community to discuss the possibility of foreign entanglement in the judge's disappearance. Though not publicly confirmed, leaks suggest that digital trail analysis had traced multiple communications between the judge and an intermediary based in Cyprus. Communications routed through layered proxies, likely with the help of intelligence-grade encryption. By afternoon, whispers of a coming arrest began circulating. Then came the official break. A sealed indictment was quietly unsealed in New York federal court, naming the judge in absentia on charges of judicial interference, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. The indictment referenced at least 3 unnamed co-conspirators, 2 of whom were described as foreign intermediaries with direct access to high-value financial instruments. That last line sent shockwaves through global markets. The DOJ, forced into transparency by growing pressure, held a rare Saturday evening press conference. Standing beneath the department's seal, the Deputy Attorney General confirmed the charges and stated bluntly, "The judge is no longer missing. He is now a fugitive." The press room erupted with questions. Will the U.S. request extradition from the UAE? Who helped him leave? Was he acting alone? The DOJ offered limited answers, but promised that every stone will be turned over. A special counsel was formally announced, an independent prosecutor with sweeping authority to investigate not only the judge, but the entire chain of events surrounding Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit and any efforts to undermine it. As night fell, the streets of D.C. turned into candlelit corridors of resolve. Demonstrators stayed. Some sang, some stood silent. Others passed out printed timelines connecting dots between media conglomerates, former intelligence directors, and judicial appointments. For many, this wasn't a moment. It was the beginning of something permanent. In a hotel room nearby, Leavitt's legal team gathered around a computer as new whistleblower documents arrived. Dozens of pages, time-stamped emails, security clearance memos, and a fragment of an internal DOJ briefing dated 6 weeks before the judge vanished. The subject line, potential asset compromise, immediate risk. There was no turning back now. What had started as a lawsuit, an $800 million civil challenge against powerful interests, had exploded into a national and global trial. Not in a courtroom, but in the open, under the watchful eyes of millions. The truth is no longer coming, it's here, and it's rewriting everything. By Sunday, America was no longer watching a story unfold. It was living inside one. The FBI, under mounting scrutiny, confirmed it had coordinated with Interpol and issued a red notice for the fugitive judge. Though the United Arab Emirates had yet to make a public statement, diplomatic channels had gone hot. U.S. officials, according to insiders, were now negotiating urgent matters of bilateral security, code language often reserved for intelligence, cooperation and covert extradition. But on American soil, the crisis was deepening. Another leak, this time from within the special counsel's office just hours after its formation, rocked the already fragile trust in government transparency. A classified intelligence report dated months before the lawsuit had surfaced. It warned of persistent foreign interest in U.S. judicial networks and cited specific vulnerabilities involving judges presiding over politically volatile litigation. The document marked eyes only, noted one jurist whose financial and ideological exposure presents significant leverage risk. The judge's name was redacted, but in the context of current events, no one needed it spelled out. Civil rights lawyers and constitutional scholars began openly discussing unprecedented measures. Could trials overseen by the judge be retroactively vacated? Would this trigger judicial review across the federal system? Could this become the largest case of legal reversal in modern history? The Supreme Court remained silent. But the silence, in this climate, was its own message. Sunday evening brought another jolt, this time from international media. Al Jazeera released surveillance footage, leaked from a private terminal in Dubai, showing a man resembling the judge stepping out of a black SUV, flanked by two individuals wearing what appeared to be diplomatic credentials. They walked directly onto a private jet bound for Singapore. The footage was time-stamped 2 days earlier. If accurate, the judge was not just hiding. He was moving, protected, and still ahead of the chase. Pressure exploded on every branch of the U.S. government. Karoline Leavitt issued a blunt response during a live national interview on a major network. This proves one thing. They're still covering for him. This man fled justice under official protection. Someone in power helped him, and we're going to expose every last thread. Her legal team dropped a seismic update. They were filing an emergency motion to reopen discovery, with expanded authority to subpoena intelligence officials, corporate entities, and any agency found to have been complicit, obstructive, or financially entangled with the judge or the case. The motion alone sent shockwaves through legal circles. No plaintiff had ever dared challenge the national security apparatus and the federal judiciary in a single sweep. But this case was no longer about precedent. Outside courthouses in cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Boston, solidarity, protests mirrored the DC movement. Protesters carried digital screens playing leaked footage and audio files, demanding accountability. One viral banner simply read, "America is the case now." Meanwhile, cyber activists, operating under banners of transparency and digital justice, claimed they were preparing to release a judicial ledger, an allegedly hacked database, of private communications and case memos involving federal judges, lobbyists, and media executives. Whether real or a bluff, the threat intensified the sense that nothing, no title, no institution, no legacy, was safe from this reckoning. As the night deepened, the special counsel made their first move. A sealed warrant was served on a former Department of Justice official tied to the early handling of Leavitt's case. Sources close to the investigation claim the official has agreed to cooperate in exchange for limited immunity. Inside the chaos, one truth emerged. The machinery was moving. The cover-up, once assumed airtight, was beginning to bleed, and at the center stood Karoline Leavitt, unrelenting, unbowed, and now more than a litigant. To millions, she had become a symbol, not of partisanship, but of something older. Raw accountability. What began as a legal claim for damages had exposed a silent architecture of influence, protection, and escape at the highest levels of power. And with every passing hour, more Americans began to ask the same question. If one judge could run, how many more already have? The answers were no longer hidden behind robes and marble halls. They were coming to light. One truth at a time. By early Monday morning, the final act began. A convoy of unmarked vehicles pulled into a secure airstrip outside Washington, D.C. Inside one of them sat the former DOJ official who had flipped, now under full federal protection, guarded by U.S. Marshals and a detail from the newly formed special counsel's office. The intel he provided over the last 24 hours had redrawn the battlefield entirely. At 6:42 a.m., the Justice Department made the unthinkable public. 2 sitting federal judges and a former intelligence director were now under investigation for alleged coordination in a clandestine effort to manipulate judicial outcomes tied to political and corporate interests, including Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit. More chilling than the names themselves was the underlying accusation: systemic judicial interference by a cabal embedded within the machinery of legal oversight, complete with offshore accounts, encrypted communications, and mechanisms to remove or silence internal threats. The public had long suspected corruption. Now they had confirmation. Within hours, the stock market reacted. Media conglomerates named in early leaks saw their valuations plunge. Law firms scrambled to distance themselves from past clients. International allies began issuing cautious statements urging full transparency and legal accountability from the United States government. Then, just before noon, a final message detonated across the digital world. The so-called judicial ledger was released. Posted on secure drop platforms and mirrored across hundreds of sites, It was a trove of thousands of files, emails, internal memos, encrypted, call transcripts, and financial routing slips. They pointed to a decade-long pattern of case rigging, judge placements, and backdoor lobbying networks. Among the documents, communications between the missing judge and a media executive discussing the strategic suppression of discovery in Leavitt's case. There was no longer any need to speculate. The truth was plain. Karoline Leavitt had walked into a courtroom expecting justice, and instead uncovered the architecture of its manipulation. At 3:15 p.m., Leavitt addressed the nation from the Capitol steps. Her tone was quieter now, not defiant but solemn. "We were told justice was blind," she said. "But what we found is that it was bound by money, by politics, by silence. We didn't chase this truth. It chased us." Her eyes scanned the silent crowd. "And now that we've seen it, none of us can unsee it. We can't go back to pretending. We don't just need new judges, we need a new standard, a new covenant between power and the people." The nation paused, watched, listened. In the days that followed, the fallout was total. The fugitive judge was confirmed to be in Singapore. Diplomatic negotiations for his return were ongoing, but a warrant for international arrest stood firm. Federal agents raided 2 major law firms. Congressional hearings were scheduled to begin within the week, titled simply, "Restoring Justice." Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit, the spark of it all, was formally moved to an independent judicial panel created by executive order, one with full oversight, rotating judges, and civilian transparency protocols. The $800 million case would proceed, not just as a legal dispute, but as a national symbol. And the judiciary, stripped of its old shields, now stood bare in the eyes of the people. America had reached the end of the line in its illusion of invulnerability. But in doing so, it had found something far more powerful than protection: accountability. What started with one voice had become many, and together, they had shattered the silence. Forever.